Welcome to Empire State Engagements. I'm Dr. Robert Childs here in Albany, New York for our special series of in-person conversations with the historians and curators of the New York State Museum. Welcome to Empire State Engagements. I'm thrilled to be on location today at the New York State Museum in Albany, New York, and I'm even more thrilled to be joined again for the second time by Ashley Hopkins-Benton, who is, I'm honored to say, our very first repeat guest. As many of you know, Ashley is a senior historian and curator in social history at the New York State Museum. She has contributed and curated several remarkable programs for the museum, including Votes for Women in 2017. She has co-authored several books, including Votes for Women and her contributions to Enterprising Waters, which brought in, among other things, her background in the arts. In her role curating social history, she has been working to build the museum's collections and representation in LGBTQ plus history, which many of you know was part of last year's interview when we discussed her oral history work with the Pride Center of the Capital Region, and also in women's history, which we will be hearing a bit about today. And so, welcome back, Ashley.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Hopkins-Benton, Senior Historian and Curator of Social History here at the New York State Museum. And today I'm really excited to share with you actually a new acquisition to our history collections. This is an industrial sewing machine, one that you would typically find in the garment industry. But we were actually approached by Mon Quan Chu and Teresa Chu Chang, both relatives, a daughter and husband of Su Ping Chu, who owned the sewing machine and used it for her hobby sewing. And it's a really exciting artifact for us because it actually tells us two totally different stories about immigrant women in the New York City area. So Su Ping Chu was an immigrant from Hong Kong. Prior to coming here, she had a correspondence relationship with Mon Quan Chu, and eventually they married. She came here and they settled in Brooklyn, where they had 2 children. Her family, before she moved from Hong Kong, was involved in the garment industry, but it was not something that she did personally. But once she got here, and unlike many other immigrant women, she was able to stay home and work in the home while her children were in school. She decided that she was ready for a hobby. So she reached out to contacts in the garment industry and purchased this sewing machine secondhand and put it into her small eat-in kitchen in their tiny Brooklyn apartment, and found great joy from it while her children were in school, and then later in the day while they were working on their homework and getting ready for bed. Her daughter recalls hearing the sound of the sewing machine as a constant in that Brooklyn apartment. And for her, Su Ping, it was not just a way to use her time to create things. Those were very important, but it was also a way to explore her new city. She would take her daughters out shopping to find new fabrics and patterns, engage them in conversations about the fashions and the style that they were going to be making and wearing. And it was a way for them to explore and get to know New York City. Now, she knew that she had a very different experience than many other immigrant women, and prior to her, this sewing machine, which was made by Singer, it's a Singer Industrial 120U, powered by a Tuffy by Consew single-phase clutch motor. And as I said, this was something that was supposed to be in an industrial garment center. So prior to Su Ping, this was located in a sweatshop in Chinatown, in Manhattan's Chinatown. This was really the center of the garment industry by the late 20th century. You would find garment shops with 30 to 50 women generally working at sewing machines just like this one right next to each other. Early on, they would do full garments. Later, they moved to more of a piecework where different people had different specialties. But this is a machine that was very heavily used. And for those women, this machine meant long hours and hard work, but also opportunity, a chance to actually make money and work in their new home. So two really different uses, different stories, but both that came out of New York City and from immigrant women from China and Hong Kong. So I'll show you a little bit about the machine. We have, as I said, the Singer Industrial machine, very heavyweight. I can say for certain, having carried it myself, that it is very, very heavy, much bigger and chunkier than you'd expect in a home sewing situation. It's mounted on this green laminate table with the measurements on the front. Really perfect in a garment factory for helping the women work fast and have all the tools that they need right at hand. And then if we go down to the bottom, and as you go, you can see that this was cared for really well. It's in very good condition. It still works. But we have this pedal that has this great wear from the years and years of use. And I like to think about all of the women that sat here at the sewing machine, using it for different purposes. Now, as I mentioned, its last user, Su Ping Chu, really used this as a hobby. She did not make money from her sewing. This was just something that brought her joy. Her daughters loved wearing the clothes that she made for them, and it was a really special thing about their mother, a very nostalgic thing to hear the sound of the sewing machine. She was aware that her immigrant experience was very different than many other women, women that she was friends with who worked in the garment industry. So she felt lucky for that. And her family emphasized that her time in Brooklyn using the sewing machine for her hobby was the happiest of her life. So I love that part of the story too, how much joy it brought to the family.
So Ashley, tell us a little bit about how you found out about this artifact.
Well, actually, it was a moment where the universe just collided in the most perfect way, for two reasons. For one, we are actually working a lot on our other collections related to Chinatown. Specifically in the 1980s, the New York State Museum brought in 3 different Chinatown store collections. The most prominent is the Takai store, which you can see on exhibit downstairs in the museum. But they also collected the Sangunxing store and one other Chinese store. Collections upon collections, all of the store fixtures, the things that they sold, all of those things. And they're wonderful. They are definitely a highlight of our visitors. They're a very male-oriented story, and I've always looked at them, and I don't think we do a good job of talking about why that is. But these stores were founded before a lot of Chinese women were able to come, before immigration laws changed. And even after the immigration laws changed and there were more Chinese families, they were still male places. Women were not expected to go into these mercantile spaces. Even though they served as community centers, they were for the men of the community. So I've always wanted to interpret that better, but I've also wanted more female-centric artifacts that tell the story of Chinatown. And so while we were already thinking about that, my coworker and I were on a work trip to New York City. We were headed down to the Museum of the Chinese in the Americas and to the Tenement Museum to see more of their exhibitions, to learn about life in Chinatown and life for garment workers in New York City. And while we were on the train, I got an email from Su Ping Chou's family saying, we have this sewing machine, this is our mother's story, and we're interested in finding a home for it. And it was absolutely perfect. So that day we went to the Tenement Museum and saw their setup of a garment worker's studio, of what the conditions were like that these women were working in, how it was a very hard labor, but also very much a community setting, and then to find that we had the sewing machine used by women in that kind of setting, and then also in a home. It was just so spectacular.
And we're going to be learning even more about this soon in New York history, aren't we?
Absolutely. I'm so excited about this story. I'm so excited about the things we can learn from this artifact, and I couldn't wait to share them. So I'm working on an Artifact New York article for the journal.
That's great. Well, thank you again, Ashley, for joining us once again and for sharing this really fascinating story with us.
Thank you.